The academic library exists as a foundational component of higher education, grounded in the core missions of teaching, learning, and research. Its purpose extends well beyond the provision of materials or study space to include active engagement in knowledge creation, intellectual inquiry, and academic success. By articulating a clear mission, the library defines why it is essential to the institution and establishes itself as a central academic unit rather than a peripheral service. This purpose shapes how the library is understood, supported, and sustained within the university. This lecture is designed to help students develop a conceptual and institutional understanding of the academic library's role in higher education. By the end of this lecture, students will be able to explain the academic library's mission in relation to the broader goals of higher education, distinguish between the library as a core academic unit and as a support service, analyze how mission clarity influences institutional perception, positioning, and sustainability, articulate the role of academic libraries in advancing teaching, learning, and research. Understanding the academic library's legitimacy within a university begins with recognizing that its mission must be deeply connected to the institution's own mission, goals, and priorities. This means going beyond a generic statement that the library supports the academic mission and instead mapping, analyzing, and communicating how specific library goals intersect with institutional objectives such as student learning outcomes, research excellence, community engagement, or enrollment strategies. To do this effectively, librarians must first identify the parent institution's mission, strategic plan, vision, competencies, and other guiding documents. These institutional statements provide not just context, but language that librarians can use to articulate the library's contribution in terms higher education leaders already value. Once these connections are identified, libraries can align their own goals and assessment plans accordingly, embedding themselves within institutional priorities and making their work part of the broader academic agenda. This alignment is not purely a planning exercise, but a foundation for assessment, decision-making, and communication. When libraries demonstrate how their services contribute to institutional goals like student success or research productivity, they strengthen their ability to participate meaningfully in campus conversations, influence policy, and secure resources. This approach reframes the library from being a background support unit to being a strategic partner in achieving the university's core mission. Strategic planning in the academic library serves as a deliberate effort to align library priorities with the broader mission and goals of the institution. Rather than functioning as an internal planning exercise, it translates institutional visions, academic priorities, and educational commitments into purposeful library actions. By grounding library goals in institutional language and strategy, the library positions itself as an essential contributor to teaching, learning, and research rather than as a standalone service unit. This alignment begins with close attention to institutional mission statements, strategic plans, and learning outcomes, which provide a shared framework for decision-making. When library initiatives reflect these priorities, resource allocation, assessment, and advocacy become more coherent and persuasive. Strategic planning also clarifies how the library demonstrates impact, shifting emphasis from activities to outcomes that matter to higher education leaders, such as student success and research productivity. Ultimately, strategic planning reinforces the academic identity of the library. By embedding its goals within institutional strategy, the library strengthens its visibility, credibility, and influence, ensuring that it remains a strategic partner in advancing the university's educational mission. Sustained relevance of the academic library depends heavily on visibility, and visibility must be intentional rather than assumed. Libraries cannot rely on the belief that their importance is self-evident. Instead, they must consistently make their contributions visible across campus. This includes regularly communicating how library services support teaching, learning, and research through reports, newsletters, presentations, dashboards, and targeted updates to academic leadership. When library work is clearly tied to institutional priorities, it is more likely to be recognized and remembered. Visibility is also strengthened through partnerships that place the library in active academic spaces rather than at the margins. Collaborating with faculty on course design, participating in curriculum committees, supporting research initiatives, and contributing to accreditation or assessment efforts allows the library to be seen as part of academic decision-making. These visible roles reinforce the library's identity as an educational partner rather than a background service. Active participation in campus conversations further sustains relevance. When library leaders attend academic council meetings, faculty forums, strategic planning sessions, and institutional events, they signal engagement and awareness of institutional priorities. This presence helps ensure that the library is included in discussions where decisions are made rather than consulted after decisions have already occurred. Without consistent visibility, even essential library contributions can fade into the background of institutional life. When library impact is assumed rather than articulated, it becomes easier for decision makers to overlook the library during budget planning, restructuring, or strategic change. Pragmatically, sustained visibility protects the library's perceived importance by ensuring that its value is repeatedly reinforced, documented, and recognized as integral to the academic mission. How the academic library is perceived carries direct structural consequences within the institution. When the library is recognized as an educational partner, it gains stability, credibility, and influence in academic planning, budgeting, and decision-making processes. In this position, the library is more likely to be consulted early in institutional initiatives, included in strategic conversations, and supported during periods of change. Conversely, when the library is viewed primarily as a support service, it becomes more vulnerable to marginalization, reduced investment, and exclusion from academic planning. Perception is shaped not only by the services the library offers, but by how effectively those services are connected to teaching, learning, and research outcomes. Libraries that can clearly demonstrate their impact on student success, faculty work, and institutional goals are more likely to be seen as essential rather than optional. This requires intentional communication, use of evidence, and the ability to articulate contributions in language that resonates with academic leadership. Strategic engagement plays a critical role in shaping perception. Participation in curriculum development, assessment initiatives, accreditation efforts, and cross-campus collaborations helps reinforce the library's academic identity. Over time, these visible contributions shape how the library is understood institutionally, influencing not just its reputation, but its long-term sustainability and role within higher education. In practical terms, an academic library operates as a coordinated system where people, spaces, technologies, and resources must work together to support academic work. Librarians are not simply service providers. They teach research skills, guide students through complex information landscapes, and support faculty and researchers in their scholarly work. Their expertise shapes how users interact with information and how effectively they navigate academic expectations. Library spaces are intentionally designed to support different types of learning and work. Quiet study areas, group collaboration rooms, instruction spaces, and informal learning zones serve distinct academic purposes. Decisions about layout, furniture, lighting, hours, and accessibility directly influence how students study, collaborate, and persist in their academic work. Poorly designed or inflexible spaces can hinder learning, while thoughtful design enhances engagement and productivity. Technologies form another essential part of this system. Discovery tools, databases, learning platforms, research software, and digital repositories enable users to find, analyze, create, and share knowledge. These tools require ongoing maintenance, user education, and integration with institutional systems such as learning management platforms. Without coordination between librarians and technology services, even robust systems can remain underused or misunderstood. Resources, both physical and digital, must be curated with academic programs, research priorities, and student needs in mind. Collection decisions affect what knowledge is accessible, whose voices are represented, and how well academic work can be supported. When collections, technologies, spaces, and staff expertise are aligned, the library functions as an effective learning environment rather than a collection of disconnected services. When these elements are not coordinated, users experience confusion, inefficiency, and barriers to learning. When they are intentionally aligned, the library actively supports academic success, reinforces institutional goals, and operates as an educational institution in its own right, rather than as a passive repository. Integration into teaching, learning, and research reflects the reality that academic work is inseparable from information practices and research skills. Students are expected to navigate complex information environments, and faculty are expected to design assignments and conduct research within evolving scholarly systems. The academic library operates at this intersection, supporting both learning and knowledge creation. In practice, integration happens when librarians collaborate with faculty during course and assignment design, helping align research expectations with available resources and appropriate methods. Through instruction, embedded support, and consultations, librarians guide students in developing research strategies, engaging with scholarly conversations, and using information ethically and critically. This work directly supports teaching goals and improves student learning experiences. Integration into research involves supporting faculty and graduate students across the research lifecycle, including literature reviews, data management, publishing, and research visibility. When this integration is strong, the library becomes part of everyday academic workflows rather than an optional resource. When it is absent, the library's impact is limited and its role appears peripheral rather than central to academic life. In real academic settings, a librarian's professional identity directly affects how they are invited to participate in campus life. When librarians teach credit-bearing courses, co-teach research-intensive classes, or design research assignments with faculty, they are seen as educators rather than support staff. For example, a librarian who regularly teaches information literacy sessions embedded in first-year seminars or graduate methods courses is more likely to be consulted when curricula are revised. Participation in shared governance also shapes academic identity. Librarians who serve on curriculum committees, assessment councils, or faculty senates gain visibility in academic decision-making. In these roles, they can influence policies related to learning outcomes, research expectations, or academic integrity, rather than reacting after decisions have already been made. Scholarly engagement further reinforces this identity. Librarians who conduct research, publish, present at academic conferences, or collaborate on grant projects are more readily recognized as academic peers. This recognition builds trust with faculty and administrators and opens doors to collaboration on research initiatives and institutional planning. When librarians are positioned this way, they are invited into conversations about curriculum, pedagogy, and research strategy. When they are not, interactions are often limited to transactional requests, such as purchasing materials or troubleshooting access, which reinforces a service-only perception and limits long-term influence. In real academic environments, effective library leadership is demonstrated through how well leaders navigate institutional structures rather than how efficiently they manage internal operations alone. For example, a library director who understands the university's strategic priorities, such as improving retention or expanding research funding, can frame library initiatives in ways that align with those goals. Instead of requesting funding for library improvements, the director might advocate for expanded research support services by linking them directly to faculty grant productivity or graduate student success. Influence is often built through relationships rather than formal authority. A library leader who regularly meets with the provost, deans, and department chairs is more likely to be consulted early in planning processes. For instance, when a university considers launching a new academic program, a director with established relationships may be invited to discuss resource needs, ensuring the library is included from the start rather than asked to adapt after decisions are finalized. Understanding campus politics also helps prevent marginalization during periods of change. During budget reductions or organizational restructuring, leaders who have demonstrated credibility and institutional awareness can more effectively protect core library functions by articulating their impact in institutional terms. Leaders who lack this understanding often find the library excluded from key discussions, reinforcing a reactive role rather than a strategic one. In practice, library leadership succeeds when it combines advocacy, awareness of decision-making processes, and sustained engagement with academic leadership, positioning the library as a trusted partner in institutional strategy rather than a unit that responds only after change occurs. Moving into leadership requires a shift from practitioner mindset to institutional stewardship. Leaders must balance advocacy for the library with loyalty to institutional goals, even when priorities conflict. This includes managing confidentiality, navigating compromise, and supporting decisions that may not fully align with personal preferences. Practically successful leaders understand that long-term influence often depends on trust, reliability, and strategic patience. Where the library is placed within the university's organizational structure sends a clear and often unspoken message about how its work is valued. When the library reports through academic affairs, it is structurally connected to teaching, learning, and research, which reinforces its role as an academic unit. This positioning makes it more likely that library leadership will participate in discussions about curriculum development, academic planning, assessment, and research priorities, rather than being consulted only on operational matters. Reporting lines also shape access to decision makers. A library director who reports to the provost or a chief academic officer typically has more direct involvement in strategic planning and budget discussions than one who reports through administrative or auxiliary units. This access affects not only funding, but also the library's ability to anticipate institutional changes, advocate for resources proactively, and align services with emerging academic needs. Organizational placement influences daily interactions as well. Libraries positioned within academic affairs are more likely to be viewed by faculty as partners in teaching and research, while those placed elsewhere may be perceived primarily as service providers. Over time, this perception affects how often the library is invited into planning conversations and how seriously its recommendations are considered. In practical terms, organizational positioning helps determine whether the library is treated as a strategic contributor to academic life or as a unit that responds after key decisions have already been made. Academic libraries operate most effectively when they are deeply connected to other units across campus rather than functioning in isolation. In practice, this means building working relationships with faculty, academic departments, instructional design units, IT services, student support offices, institutional research, and administrative leadership. These relationships allow the library to contribute to academic initiatives early, rather than being asked to support them after decisions have already been made. Collaboration often takes practical forms, such as partnering with faculty on research-intensive courses, working with instructional designers to embed library resources into online classes, or coordinating with IT on technology platforms that support research and learning. For example, when libraries collaborate with institutional research offices, they can better align assessment efforts with institutional metrics and demonstrate impact in ways that resonate with administrators. Strong collaborative relationships also improve efficiency and reduce duplication of effort. When the library is connected to campus partners, services can be coordinated rather than overlapping, and gaps in support can be identified more quickly. Over time, these collaborations position the library as a connector across academic and administrative units, reinforcing its role as a central contributor to institutional effectiveness rather than a standalone service provider. Academic libraries operate within a higher education environment that is constantly changing, and staying relevant requires active attention to those changes. Shifts in enrollment patterns, such as declining undergraduate numbers or growth in online and adult learners, directly affect how students use library spaces, services, and resources. Changes in teaching models, including hybrid instruction, competency-based education, and experiential learning, also influence how libraries support courses and design instruction. In practical terms, awareness of trends allows libraries to plan proactively rather than react under pressure. For example, recognizing increased reliance on digital materials can guide investment in electronic resources and user support before access problems arise. Awareness of evolving research practices, such as open access publishing or data intensive research, helps libraries develop services that align with faculty needs. Libraries that monitor these trends are better positioned to adapt services, reallocate resources, and remain aligned with institutional priorities before challenges become crises. While collecting data is necessary, the real value lies in understanding what that data means within the institutional context. Usage statistics, space occupancy, instruction attendance, and feedback surveys all provide clues about how the library is being used, but they do not speak for themselves. Libraries must interpret these patterns alongside institutional goals, academic calendars, and broader campus dynamics. For example, a decline in physical circulation may not signal reduced relevance, but a shift toward digital use or different study behaviors. Observing how students use spaces, listening to faculty concerns, and paying attention to informal conversations can reveal needs that are not immediately visible in reports. Pragmatically, interpreting evidence helps libraries refine services, make informed decisions, and explain their impact in ways that resonate with administrators and other stakeholders. Without this interpretation, data risks being misread or undervalued. When mission alignment, visibility, leadership, collaboration, and evidence-based decision-making are consistently integrated, the academic library operates as a strategic academic institution. In this role, the library does more than support existing activities. It actively shapes learning environments, research practices, and institutional capacity. This may include influencing curriculum design, supporting institutional assessment, advancing research infrastructure, or contributing to student success initiatives. Practically, this positioning strengthens the library's sustainability and relevance. Libraries that function strategically are more likely to be included in institutional planning, protected during periods of change, and recognized as essential contributors to academic quality. Rather than responding after decisions are made, these libraries participate in shaping those decisions, ensuring that the library remains central to the academic mission of the institution rather than peripheral.